Good morning, folks. We appreciate y'all's presence. My name is Member Harper-Madison. I am the very proud councilperson for District 1 in the great city of Austin and the lovely state of Texas. I have a few things to share with you this morning, and I'll start by saying disturbing, repugnant, and to so many Black and Latinx Austinites, not at all surprising. An anonymous whistleblower has leveled allegations of racism against our former Assistant Chief of Police, Justin Newsom, and they are beyond reprehensible. The whistleblower's email claims that Chief Newsom continuously used the most hateful word in the English language for over a decade. It specifically claims that he used the words Negro and the other really awful N-word to describe President Obama and my predecessor, Councilmember Ora Houston, and his own colleagues and subordinates. The idea that an open racist could rise to the top of the ranks of our police department should shake every Austinite to their very core. But it would also validate the lived experience of Black and Latinx members of the community of the city of Austin. There have been countless allegations of police abuse against people of color in the city of Austin for as long as I could remember, and well beyond my 42 years of life. The legacy of racism runs long from slavery to Jim Crow to the modern era, where it looms openly in our de facto segregation and hides behind smiling faces. It probably doesn't surprise anyone to know that I have personally experienced racism both prior to and during my tenure as councilperson. This year, a white woman right here in this beautiful building to my face called me an uppity N-word. Imagine what regular residents who do not hold the public power that I have. Racism is prevalent in Austin. Racism is prevalent in Austin. The anonymous whistleblower's allegations implicate the upper reaches of our police department. The city manager is absolutely correct in ordering an independent investigation into these highly credible accusations. The integrity of that investigation must be a top priority, and its breadth must be deep and long. We, to determine who knew what and when did they know it, whose lives and careers were affected, and how entrenched any culture of racism is in our police department. If racism is being tolerated at the very top, it is highly likely it is being tolerated throughout the entire department. That stands not only for the Austinites, that stands not only for the Austin Police Department, but also for this building, for City Hall, and our entire community. It is well past. It is well past time that we hold every public, forthright dialogue to confront racism in the city of Austin. Empty gestures will no longer suffice. On my end, I will be crafting policies to reverse more than a century of discrimination and intolerance. And I ask my colleagues to join me. It might get uncomfortable for some people. But as Frederick Douglass said, if there's no struggle, there is no progress. I invite you to join me in the struggle. Our next speaker is Cristian Caballero, who is the Vice Chair of the Human Rights Commission and also with Texas Appleseed. Thank you very much for being present.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. It is a pleasure. Again, my name is Cristian Caballero. Can you all hear me? Hello? Is that good? Okay, just making sure. As Council Member Natasha mentioned, I am the Vice Chair of the Human Rights Commission. I've had the privilege of serving that position for 4 years now. I also am the Community Outreach Coordinator at Texas Appleseed, and I'm a long community activist and organizer here in Austin, Texas, originally from El Paso, Texas. And as a Latina from the border, coming here 10 years ago, I saw the reality of how racism perpetuates in our daily lives. And I think it's incredibly vital and important that we not only recognize it and acknowledge it, but that we actively address it individually, but also systemically in our everyday institutions that we are part of. I'm here to support and amplify the community's concerns in addressing racism within our city. No person or institution is without bias, nor should they be exempt from being held accountable. We need to acknowledge that racism persists in our everyday lives, knowingly or unknowingly, and we need to properly address it through disciplinary action to actively change the culture that perpetuates it. Dehumanizing and reducing people to derogatory terms should never be taken lightly and should be taken seriously. We cannot tolerate or turn a blind eye to it, no matter how minute it might seem. We need to listen to the voices that share their truth and lived experience of racism, validate them, and do justice to the community and the leadership that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce Chaz Moore, community activist, advocate, and proud founder of Austin Justice Coalition. Thank you.
Come on. First, I just want to thank Councilwoman Harper-Madison for calling this press conference to talk about these serious allegations. I just have a few things that Austin Justice Coalition and Just Liberty has worked on last night, and we'll be working with other leaders, hopefully to sign on and press city manager and city council to implement some of these things moving forward. So while we definitely agree that because of the recent allegations related to racist communications among top brass at the Austin Police Department, we absolutely agree that that must be thoroughly investigated. But we ask that the city do more than just verify existing allegations against one or two leaders. When racism is tolerated at the top levels of the department, that tolerance is going to allow racism to fester at every level. Again, we'll be working with leaders to address the following action items that I'm about to read off. And if you have any questions, then we can address those at the end. First and foremost, we think that the city, the Austin Police Department, should conduct a department-wide audit of social media communications modeled after Plainview Project's recent investigation into racist and violent social media commentary at police departments across the country, as well as similar review of employee communications through department-issued email and cell phones. While the audit is underway, revise current disciplinary policies related to racist communications and determine the standard and significant discipline that should be applied equally to any sworn officer regardless of rank. No officer should be allowed to retire with full benefits before a disciplinary investigation is complete. Third, ensure that evidence of racial bias by an officer that is more than 180 days old does not preclude the application of discipline. If the contract needs to be reopened to clarify the 180-day rule, the city should launch new negotiations with the Austin Police Association. Fourth, after the completed investigation, provide evidence of racial bias that discredits any officer to the district attorney in order to facilitate informing the defense in any cases brought by that officer in completing a full review to determine whether racial bias may have resulted in false or inflated charges or racially discriminatory outcomes. Release to the public all training materials used at the Academy and create a public process to comprehensively evaluate all training to ensure we are building a force free of bias and focus to the safety of all Austinites. And last but not least, and we think this is the most important while the department is going through some changes, some much needed changes, we believe wholeheartedly that the police department should issue a moratorium on new cadet classes until a new curriculum is developed, so we stop recreating the same culture. And briefly, I'll just say this. I think a lot of the work that we do, we use the word reform. And reform is kind of like if you have a janky car and you just paint it, right? Like you have the same car and you just paint it a different color. You really haven't changed anything. If you don't get under the hood and change the engine and change the brakes and change the thing that actually makes the car work and valuable, that's reform. We need actual systemic change in this city. If Austin is actually committed to all this progressive kumbaya and racial kumbaya that we say, we need some actual system change. We need some people change. We need some heart change. We need some conscious change in this city, right? Like, this is not new. And the fact that here we are at 11 a.m. on a Friday morning is tiring, right? Like, this is nothing new. The fact that he has been alleged of saying this for the last decade is absurd. At some point in this city, we have to get serious about being who we say we are. I take that back. We have to get serious about who we say we are, who we think we are. Austin is no different than rural Alabama, in my honest opinion. Until we get serious about actually changing some systems, changing some institutions, getting radical, getting new with some ideas, we'll be doing this again next week, next year, next month. So my challenge is to the city manager, city council, all of us. What are we going to do to make sure that we can be the city that we claim so hard to be? This has to stop. Enough is enough. At some point, we have to be serious about being this blue dot in a red suit that we like to claim. Because right now, it feels like we're a blue painted cherry. And at some point, we really have to get to the core of what all this is, and it's racism. It's systemic, institutionalized racism. That's why black people are moving to Pflugerville. That's why black people are moving to Manor and Hutto, because they're done with this. Because for years, no matter who we have in the mayor's seat on the third floor, we still have these same problems. So at some point, we have to get serious. So, Natasha, thank you for your leadership, and looking forward to working with you.
I appreciate you very much. Thank you, Chaz. That'll conclude our speakers, but I would just like to follow up with what Mr. Moore said. This is not new to us. We do this every day. And the well-meaning progressives in our community who call us friend, who look at us in our eyeballs every day, who proclaim love and affection for us, we've been telling y'all about this forever. This is not new to us. This is our daily lived experience. That lady that said that yucky word to me, you guys, I feel it all the time. It's palpable. I feel it all the time. But she was bold enough to say the words. So I need y'all to get bold. I need the people who call us friend, neighbor, colleague to say the words. When I, the singular black council person, use the words racism, segregation, white supremacy, when I'm the only one saying the words, it makes me a very easy target. And when I say target, I don't mean just in this copper building. I'm talking about my life. I'm talking about my home. I'm talking about my person. You believe in what I'm standing up for? Then stand next to me as a true co-conspirator. Don't be my ally. Fight with me. Let's fight together to make this city the best it can possibly be. Come with us and let's fix it, finally. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to take a few questions. Thank you. I'm happy to take a few questions, but it turns out people who look like me, we get to deal with this all day, every day, and still have to go upstairs and go to work because there's stuff to do. So I'm happy to take a few questions, but I got work to do. So if you guys want to let a few fly, and then if there's anybody else behind me that you'd like to ask questions of, now's the time.
Councilmember, you said these accusations were not at all against Newsom were not at all surprising. Have there been past complaints against him, past accusations of
I can't speak to that. I think when I say they're not at all surprising, what we're talking about is, so I'll tell you a story. I was 9 months pregnant, and I got pulled over for going 32 and a 30. I didn't realize those machines were calibrated to pick up 32 and a 30, but I got pulled over, and I got dragged out of my car in a swimsuit, 9 months pregnant. What I'm telling you when I say it's not surprising is the lived experience of black and brown people in this city, in this state. It looks like this for us. This is not a surprise to us. This is not new. There's nobody I called to say, this is what's transpiring currently, who went, my word, I cannot believe it. Not in Austin, Texas. Now, I did get that response from some of my white friends, colleagues, allies. Nobody black or brown that I told this story to was surprised. This is how we live, y'all. This is our lived experience. And for those of us who attempt to gaslight us and tell us we're making it up, we're race baiting, oh, you're just looking for it. Check yourself.
Do you feel like they're taking this as seriously as they could?
That's a really good question, and I'd like to start by saying I really do appreciate the opportunity for humans to evolve. I see the evolution of my colleagues currently taking this as seriously as possible. Do I think that was the case early on? I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. I'm going to say that it's easy for people for whom this is not your lived experience to not take this 100% seriously. Because the truth of the matter is, when you can't relate, it's difficult for you to take it that seriously. I will say this, I trust my colleagues. I trust their ability to be mindful and considerate and really do like Mr. Moore pointed out. We're well beyond slaps on wrist. We're well beyond meaningless, dry, vague attempts at punishment. What we're talking about right now is not reform, like Chaz said. What we're talking about is blowing it up and starting over. There's nothing to salvage. These systems are so broken, they have to be eradicated, erased, and we have to start over. And I really am looking forward to the opportunity to full facing as we are the 11th largest city in the nation, y'all. We are a major metropolitan city. We're not a sleepy little college town anymore. We are a big city with big city problems, but we're still dealing in old school relics. Let's stop that. I'm looking forward to us doing that, and I trust my colleagues to join me in doing just that.
Councilmember, you said it's important to find out who knew what and when. Do you mean finding out what she mainly knew about this behavior and what he did or didn't do?
I can appreciate the question. I'm not talking specifically about anybody. I'm saying who, everybody who knew what and when did they know it? And when I ask that question, I'm not talking about exclusively accountability, although it's high on the list. What I'm talking about is complicit. What I'm talking about is if you knew, if I have been as a council member, if I have been open about expressing vulnerability and saying, these things are happening to me, if you knew and you didn't tell me, you're complicit. What I'm saying is, it is important that the community knows who knew what and when, and what did they do. I'm gonna take one last question, but I really do gotta go to work, y'all.
The policies that Chaz laid out, are these specific policies that you are interested in bringing forward to the council?
I'm gonna let Chaz speak to that. I'm only just now seeing some of that, but there's so much of it that resonates with me. I think it's very important that we sort of look through this and be intentional about our forward movements. But if you'd like to speak specifically about the policies, it would be Chaz to answer.
I'm just trying to get a sense of, it sounds like you're interested in them, but there's more talk that has to happen.
That really resonates with me is the ability to look into what do people in positions of power in the city of Austin say on social media, both public and private facing. Accountability is key, and I think it's absolutely time that we take a look into what everybody's doing and saying. Thank you guys. Appreciate you coming out this morning.